Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia was living the American dream. He had built a life in Maryland over 15 years. He had a wife, a U.S. citizen, who loved him. They had a child together, a child born right here in the United States. Kilmar was a dedicated father, a loving husband, and a contributing member of his community. But Kilmar had also fled danger in his home country of El Salvador. He was granted protection from deportation in 2019 due to credible threats to his safety. His life was in Maryland, with his family, where he truly belonged. Then, on March 15, 2025, that life was suddenly ripped away. Kilmar was deported to El Salvador. The reason? An administrative error, the U.S. government claimed. Just like that, a husband was separated from his wife, a father from his child. A man who had sought refuge in America found himself thrust back into the very danger he had once escaped. This is not just a story about immigration, it's about justice. It's about accountability, it's about the very soul of America. Kilmar's deportation sent shockwaves through his community and beyond. How could this happen to someone who had followed all the rules, who had been granted legal protection? The answer, as is so often the case, lies in the labyrinthine bureaucracy of the immigration system. A system that, under the previous administration, had become increasingly hostile and unforgiving. The U.S. government admitted that Kilmar's deportation was a mistake, an administrative error they called it. But buried within that seemingly innocuous phrase lies a chilling truth. Bureaucratic incompetence can have devastating, life-altering consequences. The government argued that the only mistake was the destination of the deportation. They claimed that Kilmar was supposed to be deported, just not to El Salvador. This argument, as the Supreme Court would later recognize, was absurd and dangerous. Kilmar was deported without due process. He was never given a chance to defend himself in court. He was never given the opportunity to present his case, to prove that he posed no threat, to remind the government of the protection he had been legally granted. He was simply rounded up and removed from the country he called home, all because someone, somewhere, had made an administrative error. This is not how justice is supposed to work in America. Due process is a fundamental right enshrined in the Constitution. It means that everyone, regardless of their immigration status, is entitled to a fair hearing before the government can take away their liberty. But in Kilmar's case, due process was entirely absent. He was denied the most basic of rights, treated like a pawn in a system that had lost sight of its own humanity. Kilmar's ordeal didn't end with his deportation. He was sent to one of El Salvador's notorious mega-prisons. These prisons are overcrowded, violent, and rife with human rights abuses. They are places where hope goes to die. And the U.S. government, you might ask, is complicit in this system. That's right, folks. The U.S. government pays El Salvador millions of dollars to detain deportees like Kilmar. So not only did the U.S. government wrongly deport Kilmar, but they also effectively paid to have him imprisoned in a dangerous and inhumane facility. It's a cruel irony that a country founded on principles of freedom and justice would be complicit in such a system. Kilmar's story is not an isolated incident. It is a stark reminder of the human cost of America's broken immigration system. These mega-prisons are not just a problem for El Salvador. They are a problem for the United States. They are a stain on our national conscience. We cannot claim to be a beacon of hope and freedom while we are simultaneously funding and enabling the incarceration of innocent people in such horrific conditions. Kilmar's case eventually made its way to the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court, and in a unanimous decision, the court sent a clear message. The government cannot simply deport people without due process. The justices recognized the danger of the government's argument. If the government could deport someone without due process, then well, they could deport anyone. They could even deport U.S. citizens and then just claim it was an administrative error. The Supreme Court's ruling in Kilmar's case was a victory for the rule of law. It was a reaffirmation that even the government is not above the law, that even the most powerful branch of government must respect the rights of individuals. This is what makes America different, or at least it's what's supposed to make America different, but the fight for justice is far from over. The Supreme Court ordered the government to bring Kilmar back to the United States, but the details of his return are still being worked out. And more importantly, his case highlights a systemic problem in the U.S. immigration system, a system that is often more focused on punishment than on justice, a system that is, frankly, in desperate need of reform. We need to hold the government accountable for its actions. We need to ensure that what happened to Kilmar never happens again. But Kilmar's story is just one of many. We cannot forget the countless others who have been wronged by our broken immigration system. The families torn apart, the dreams shattered, the lives destroyed. We need to demand better. We need to demand justice. We need to demand a system that reflects our values as Americans, a system that is fair, humane, and just. Because, in the words of the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.